I only just saw the news about Lee. I imagine you've been talking with him a bit. What memories do you have of him?
Ironically, I have not spoken with him until I think I seem to remember he and I had a brief exchange of emails within, say, the last 5 years. Um, and it was just hey, what's up? What are you doing? I know, his parting words with Megadeth. We did the first three shows in February 1984. Me, Dave, Kerry King, and Lee. Then we went back up to the Bay Area in April and did two more shows. And those are really kind of the launch of the band. Kerry went back to Slayer. He never left Slayer. He was mostly just filling in to help us out. And then Lee's parting words were, I'm going to go take some acid and go up into the mountains and find myself. Yeah, Megadeth had that effect on people. What was, look, he broke his leg. I remember he broke his leg right before we did that last run of shows. And he had a real hard time playing. So he cut the cast off so he could play. I mean, so this guy was committed, I mean, he was committed. Now, as funny as that was to say back in 1984, I do know when I chatted with him here, in the recent years, he became a Christian, found his faith, found his path. So, he ended well, he landed well. Look, we were all young, I was 18, 19, I guess 19 when we launched the band in those shows. Gary probably the same. I think he and I are the same age. Dave's a couple years older than us. Lee somewhere in the same realm, So look, we were young. We were all trying to figure it out. Lee was like he was from Ohio. He's a stranger in a strange land. I think he and a couple of his buddies moved out to LA. Like a lot of people like me from the Midwest, we move out to LA to try to make it, so to speak. I felt I had a pretty good chance. First of all, I came from a good family who had supported my endeavors back in Minnesota in the Midwest. I'd done the time in the clubs and the ballrooms and all this stuff back there. I owned the PA, I owned the lights, I had the van and the trailer. We rehearsed at my family's farm. So I felt like, I had a grasp of what this was, right? And how to put it together. I wasn't just a rebel without a cause. Because, musicians come in a lot of different forms. Some of them truly gifted musicians, but haven't a clue about life, haven't a clue about anything, can't get along with anyone. That person's going to have a hard go. Other people just don't want to have a job. So they think it's just about, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That sounds like a good career path. And that works maybe for a little while until it kicks your ass and sends you to rehab or, sends you out, whatever, has its way with your life. And then there's a very, very few of us who, grasp, that it's a gig, it's a job, it's a career. You have to suit up, show up every day. I mean, I still do it. Look, I just got up an hour ago, had breakfast, had coffee, and I'm on the phone now all morning doing interviews to Australia for Kings of Thrash. It's a job like any other, right? And, I'm essentially self-employed. I own my own bands. I own my own businesses, but, it's an entrepreneurial thing for sure. At least for me, it is. But, you have to, when you water what grows, and what grows is what you water, So to me, rock and roll, is while it's a wild beast, it's also, it has its nuances. And so, I think a lot of people, and I think Lee, look, he came out, he gave it a shot, and he realized, yeah, this isn't for me. This isn't my path. And it's as your Australian brethren once said, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
Yes, indeed. Mate, so obviously with this Kings of Thrash lineup, how did it come together?
I had the idea to do this back. It was right after I was out of Megadeth in the fall of 2021. I'd gone to a big autograph show in New Jersey called the Chiller Theater. And fans were coming to me, obviously very disappointed I was no longer in the band. They had just seen the band play. I'm not going to lie, a lot of complaints that the set list was not very adventurous. It was only 7 or 8, 9, 10 songs, kind of the same songs year after year after year. As they're handing me stacks of records for me to sign, in particular, Killing Is My Business. And I always felt, I wanted to play this record in 2018, I think it was when it came out. I thought, there's one venue in Chicago called the Metro that's still open that we actually played on that tour. I think it's the only venue that's still around from 1985, from the tour back then. And, while I had the ears of it for a minute, it just never had the interest to go, and of course we're still doing Dystopia, but I don't know, to me, and this is one of the brilliant things I see Metallica do. They do stuff like this, right? And so to me, it was kind of like, one night only, Megadeth plays Killing Is My Business. And I think if we put forth a little bit of effort, it would have been something that the fans would have just loved the shit out of it, probably wouldn't have been a world tour like the 20th anniversary Rest in Peace was when I went back to the band, but I do feel it's one of those records that, over the years has grown in this sort of, fan cult classic status. So after I did this autograph show in 2021, I called Chris Paul and actually go, dude, let's go out and play Killing Is My Business and Peace Out. So those are the two records that he was a part of. And first he said, yeah. Then he called me back a half hour later. He goes, dude, I can't do that. There's no way. I don't have enough time, and I got other stuff going. I said, just relax. We'll see how it plays. I'm going to make a couple calls and see where it goes. So fast forward to January 2022. 2-3 months later, I'm working on the Nick Menza documentary in Los Angeles, and Jeff Young and I get reconnected. In fact, he helped actually get us the studio where we could host a lot of the interviews and do a lot of the production work there initially. And we went to dinner, and he started humming these riffs of these songs that he and I were working on from back in 1988 when he was still in the band. And I remember these songs because they were very cool. And of course, then he, was out of the band shortly after. And so here we are, reconnecting over Nick Menza, talking about songs from 1988. So we went in the studio a few weeks later. We wrote and recorded some new songs, some demos, right? So now he and I are reconnected. And I bring up to him, I go, dude, I got this idea about going out and playing some of these early records, because I know the fans aren't going to get to hear them ever again, right? And so I brought up Killing Is My Business. I said, so far so good. So what's another one? It fell right between Peace Sells and Rest in Peace, which of course get all the fan glory and all the sort of the big press. And so I have his ear, and lo and behold, Chuck Wrights from Quiet Riot hosts an event in LA called the Ultimate Jam Night at the Whiskey in Hollywood. And Jeff hits me literally a month later, goes, dude, they're going to do a tribute to the Big Four. You want to come out and jam a couple of tunes together? I said, totally. I said, hell yeah, man. I said, as long as we can play Mary Jane. I said, that's the one song, from that that song hasn't been heard. I honestly don't think we played that song since the Rest in Peace tour in Japan in 1991. I think literally that might have been one of the last times we ever played that song. So I said, so we did. We played Peace Sells, In My Darkest Hour, and Mary Jane at the Whiskey. And Chaz was our singer that night, who I had actually known from his Megadeth tribute band that he has called Woke Up Dead out of San Diego. And it all came together, you know. Fred Aching he plays the Bolt Boys, but he also sat in and jammed some Slayer tunes that night. And me and Jeff were like, yeah, that's the guy. So four of us, you know, we formed Kings of Thrash and went out with Chris Poland a few months later in October and did these four shows. We filmed and recorded the Whiskey A Go Go show, which we felt was kind of fitting. That's where it started. We would film and record that with the Cleopatra Records, put that out. It's called The Best of the West, live at the Whiskey A Go Go. And, you know, that set in motion a U.S. tour back in February and March. And then the phone rang for us to head down under and go see y'all next week. And, you know, that's the long answer to a short question. That's how it all came together. There's the history. Interview's over. There we go.
Well, I'll tell you what, in the space of that answer, you've actually knocked out 3 of my questions, so now I'm going to have to think on my feet. Fortunately, I'm fucking great at this, so watch me kill it anyway. Mate, you would have been to Australia a lot of times throughout the years. What are some of your best memories of touring here?
You know, look, certainly the first time, you know, it was interesting. Me and Jeff Young were supposed to go on the So Far So Good So What tour, and we ended up canceling it. And that set us back actually a bit. You know, it took a bit. The promoter finally, there was angry fans, and I know the promoter wasn't super thrilled, of course, because he had money, you know, out there to promote it. But excuse me, he ended up, I think it was the same promoter. He did end up bringing us back in 1991 on the Rest in Peace tour. And we did a whole Pacific Rim. We did Australia, New Zealand. No, maybe not even New Zealand. I think just Australia. And then up to Japan, and we finished in Hawaii. It was a pretty fun tour in early 1991. So that certainly, because it was the first time, right? And we did all the Eastern cities there. You know, 2 other times, 2010, when I went back to the band, we did the Rest in Peace album in its entirety. And we did that No Sleep Till tour, right? No Sleep Till Melbourne, No Sleep Till Perth, No Sleep Till Sydney. And that was cool because that was with a lot of different bands. Parkway Drive was an up-and-comer at that time. Guar was on the bill. No Effects, I think, was the other co-headliner with Megadeth. So we were kind of the metal band, and then there was a bunch of kind of alternative, different styles of groups, you know. You know, one of the other ones that I did that I really liked is I went over there in 2015. Might have been late 14, actually, late 2014. I went over and I did a spoken word tour. I had a promoter asked me to come over because I just put out my new book, My Life with Death. And I, you know, of course, Henry Rollins is probably one of the most well-known for spoken word. And I was like, what do I do? Are we sitting around sipping tea, like reading the book? Like, what is this, you know? And I said, hey, you can be whatever you want. So I brought my bass and I basically kind of was a clinic storyteller thing. And what's fun about that is that helped me launch a series called Bass Story. And then I basically took that all around the world. I went to Europe with it. So I went to South America. I went across the USA. And, you know, Megadeth, we had a lot of downtime, you know, 2018, 19, you know, we were off the road, you know, for most of that time. And so Bass Story, which started essentially in Australia in 2015, let's call it, it was right before I recorded the Dystopia album. And that was a lot of fun. You know, I went everywhere. I went to Perth, did all the other Eastern cities. And, you know, that kind of helped develop what became the Ellefson band, doing, you know, out, you know, performing some of the Megadeth classics, writing some of my own material, putting out the Ellefson solo records. So, you know, in a lot of ways, I have to thank Australia for that, because that's really what launched that and sort of got a solo career moving forward. for the Ellefson band, which, has led me into a whole bunch of other cool things. And now post Megadeth again, has helped me just stay relevant and stay in touch with the fans and keep moving life forward.
I had an interview last year with Nurgle from Behemoth, and we talked about you, and I noticed that you had you posted I was going back through your Instagram, and you posted a selfie with him. We won't get into obviously the bad stuff that's been covered far too much as it is, but one quote that you said that really resonated with me, because of a similar experience I had in my life, was that find out who your friends are. Throughout this, who cares about the people who didn't have you back? Who did you find really supportive and just awesome through the whole thing?
Well, first of all, pretty much everybody, because it was a bullshit situation. And Twiggy for Marilyn Manson, a whole bunch of people, who I've been friends with. Nurgle has become a friend, and I know he publicly spoke out in my defense and was very supportive to me. And I didn't even know him. I was a fan of his band. I just met him recently here when we were in Poland with Diet, and now have become definitely friends with him. And he, he's a real mensch. He's a stand-up guy. He's not afraid to speak up and step up. And I think that says a lot about someone's character. I read something really great. Jason Flom, who is Lava Records, signed a bunch of great stuff, Trans-Siberian Orchestra. He's working with he's just a great guy. He put up something the other day. He said, I'd rather be excluded for who I included than to be included because of who I excluded. Right. Mm-hmm. I thought, man, that says it all. And what I found out is the people who distance themselves from me are the ones who were guilty of shit way worse than anything I fucking did. And let me tell you that right now. And that's where some friends came alongside me and said, man, I had something similar happen. And when my band or my boss or my people distanced from me, they're like, oh, it's like the mirror popped up of like, oh shit, they saw themselves in the mirror. And, this is, it's which is why I set out immediately to settle the score, and meaning, to say, hey, fuck you, how dare you do this to me or anybody, and of course, everybody immediately, because, everybody's trying to protect their reputation and their public image and all that. I mean, I understand. I understand on one level that the embarrassment or whatever, like, oh my gosh, what is this? But it's like, man, I think sometimes we find, sometimes in situations that we've been in the longest, we find out we really aren't that close after all, and at the end of the day, I knew that when I came back to Megadeth in 2010, I saved their fucking ass, because there was no one else who was going to be playing Rust in Peace, and it was a perfect setup for that. And, look, after 11, almost 12 years there, if that journey's over, well, move on, you know what I mean? And I didn't sit around and lick my wounds and cry and, I'm not making a career now of throwing rocks at them, it's like, why? Just fucking move on, man, and, so I had a lot of really wonderful supporters. Like I said, pretty much everybody, are just, and look, I think the other reality of it is, a lot of people kind of, oh shit, that could happen to any one of us, some related thing like that, this sort of celebrity gaming and all this kind of shit. And so, look, you live, you learn, you move on, and I think that's, our music community. Look, I'm only famous because I'm a musician. You know what I mean? It's like, and I always say, look, do things, be famous for what you do. Don't just do things to go be famous. I'm not a social media influencer and all this kind of bullshit. I play songs. Songs, unfortunately, a lot of people like. So that's why I ever got any notoriety in the first place. And honestly, that's what I'd rather be known for, is doing that. So that's the thing that I've kept doing.
I am a lifelong Pantera fan, and Dimebag, famously named his signature drink after a Megadeth lyric.
Yeah.
What were your memories of him?
So it's funny. I remember the day he got the black tooth grin tattoo. They were on tour with us over here in Europe. Countdown to Extinction for us. It was Vulgar Display of Power for them. It was 1992. We were playing at the docks in Hamburg, Germany, and we were in the Reeperbahn. The club is actually in the kind of St. Pauli Reeperbahn area, right? And which essentially is the red light district, that kind of area. And so, we're all young lads, out and about. And I remember he comes into sound check and he, had his shorts on, right? So he goes, "Check it out, Dad, black tooth grin." And he points to his leg where he's got the tattoo. And I'm like, "Dude, I got a tattoo in the Reeperbahn." He goes, "Fuck yeah, Dad, black tooth grin, man." And it was a small club, so our dressing rooms were kind of all down a little hallway that we all had to walk to each other's dressing rooms. And so I was hanging out with him, and he was playing, and we're talking about his pick squeal and his whole kind of, that whole pick squeal wang bar thing that he does. And so I had first met them in Dallas, Texas, in 1988, and I was introduced to them. We went out drinking, and then they were playing the next night, I think, and I went to go see them play. They invited me up on stage to play Peace Cells. Those guys could freaking drink and still sounded amazing. When we drank, we sounded like shit. You know what I mean? Like, I was impressed at how much they drank and how freaking awesome they were. I mean, they were a great band. And I knew of them, they were in a lot of the magazines, and, you could tell. And he was Diamond Daryl then. He wasn't Dimebag yet, right? So he was Diamond Daryl, and he was an up and coming star for sure. Everybody loved him. But they were great, man. I mean, super great bands. And so that was on the Power Metal record that just come out, which I love that album, man. It's people don't know that before Cowboys from Hell, there was actually, I think, 3 other Pantera records. Phil and Selmo had just joined the band.
Yeah.
But Dime told me that night in '88, he told me, he said, he goes, "Man, brother, I want to tell you, Peace Cells changed my life." And I kind of shrugged it off like, "Yeah, cool, man. Thanks, bro." He goes, "No, I want to tell you right now, Peace Cells, that album changed my life." And he hit me right between the eyes with it a second time. And I was like, "Oh, thank you. I appreciate that." And he really wanted to drive the point home of that record, and so it was great to just, we toured with them a lot, had them out with us on the road. I remember they wouldn't play Cemetery Gates, and I mean, we loved that song. So at the end of that tour in '92, we finished, I think, at the Art Shock Festival or somewhere up. We finished in Holland, I remember, and they finally played it that night. They came out and pranked us a little bit. They knew probably not to fuck with us too much, like doing the kind of last show pranks or hooligan, shenanigans. But they came out on stage, I don't know, dressed in their underwear or something like that, or they sent their crew out, or they fucked with us a little bit. But I remember that night they finally played Cemetery Gates, and which is such a great song. And I think at that point, Vulgar was so heavy, and Phil had shaved his head, and he was on the cover of the magazines. He was a real, kind of almost hardcore star at that point, right? He was really leading the kind of this underground hardcore thing into the mainstream. And I think for them, Cemetery Gates was like too much of a ballad. We're like, "Come on, it's a fucking great song. You got to play it," and they finally did. So it was great to see Phil and Rex last week at Grass Pop. you know, he and I have I've stayed in touch with those guys. Bill has jammed with us with Metal Allegiance, and I've seen Rex around quite a bit. So, you know, it's nice to see those guys land well and well. You know, they too were super supportive to me a couple years ago with nice messages to me, and just, you know, really had my back, you know. Or, I mean, look, any of us who have been in rock and roll more than a minute or two, and we've all been through some shit, man, you know, and as has everybody, man. Everybody, it's called life, man, you know. So, but yeah, it was great to see them, and, you know, I'm glad you know, they're doing that very respectfully. I think fans love hearing those songs again, and you know, so I'm happy for them, man. They're handling it very well.